General, welcome on Parallel 42. This is our name of our program. And of course, welcome in Georgia.
I'm excited to be here. It's my first visit.
Thank you. So let me first express my respect and appreciation of your contribution to increase our defense capabilities. I mean, Georgian defense capabilities.
Thank you. Let me express my respect for your troops who I've served with. They're very disciplined, they're skilled, and they're brave.
Thank you so much. Let's start from the purpose of your visit and GDRP. What is the significance of this program for Georgia, and how could it help to increase Georgian defense capabilities?
Well, you know, it's a bilateral program, U.S. and Georgia, and it's really a centerpiece of our very strong relationship at this point. So it is Georgia Defense Readiness Program is what that acronym stands for. But really, it's focused on working together to build the combat readiness of your forces, the capabilities of your forces. It's based on the NATO standards and NATO interoperability as well. And it has a component of also working on training management so that you can sustain that combat readiness over time. So the purpose is building your maneuver battalions, their ability to defend your country.
So, and that's what I would like to ask you about. How could it help us with the SNGP, I mean, the substantial NATO package or Georgian package? How could it help?
Well, the substantial NATO Georgia package obviously is a NATO component of this. It is focused, and it has about, I think, 15 initiatives, but they're also focused on the same thing. They're just specific components of ensuring that we can build capability within your force, to ensure that we can build management and sustainment within the force and your defensive systems here, as well as reforms in terms of security reform. That's the NATO side of this. The U.S. piece that's bilateral, we're part of NATO as well, is very complementary. So very much the same things. For instance, the NATO piece works to develop the Joint Training and Evaluation Center. The U.S. side also brings the Combat Training Center, and that's a subset of the other. So all working hand in hand to increase the defensive capability of your forces, your ability to protect the integrity of your country.
You were talking about the joint, I mean, bilateral efforts of this GDRP. So where the fundings are coming from?
Well, the funding for this is from two places, actually, for the U.S. side. On ours, it's a security assistance funding from the United States, but it's also supported with Georgia's budget and funding as well. So it's bilateral, and that's what supports the training that we'll actually have the opening ceremony for tomorrow.
Let me move to the Europe. And sure you might know that we are really concerned that relations between U.S. and Europe are somehow most difficult since the collapse of the Soviet Union right now. And there are several issues of difference, and I would like to ask you about one of them, which is somehow in AOR. This is the funding of defense with the 2% of GDP inside the European countries. There are a lot of assessments of threats inside Europe, starting from the possible terrorist attack to interstate conventional wars, or even some kind of cyber threats and so on, a lot of them. What is your feeling why European countries refuse to spend more for their security? Is that a problem of realizing the level of threats or any other reasons?
Well, I think, first of all, it's just important to realize that in Europe today, the challenges that we see in Europe are the most demanding, dynamic, complex environment that we've seen since the Cold War, without a doubt. And there's a number of challenges, and the immediacy of those challenges are different depending on what part of Europe you're in. So that's part of this equation as well. Secondly, that 2% is very important. And, as you know, the members of NATO agreed to that. The United States has been insistent on it, that we meet that 2% GDP, as well as 20% of that being in modernization, because of the environment we face today. This environment's different. You noted some of those things: cyber, disinformation, space, some of the new technology. That's new. It affects the character of warfare or conflict, and we have to invest in those new capabilities. So that's the call for that. I would point out that Georgia, an aspiring member of NATO, already meets the 2% GDP and the 20% invested in modernization. So, you know, my hat's off to Georgia.
But anyway, what's wrong with the European countries? Why they are not spending their best for their defense?
Every nation, all nations, to include the United States, you know, it's always the dilemma of you absolutely want to support your society and what they need, you know, in education and health and the things that supports them. And so you have to balance that and security. And that's probably the demand in most of these countries, is trying to balance that against, you know, a challenging budget at this time in Europe. It's a sovereign decision. We're asking them to make that change between now and 2024, so they've got some time.
And how could it be solved? And do you feel that there is some kind of solution in foreseeable future? Well,
I think there is. I mean, listen, the leaders, military and political, have to have resolve. They have to be honest with their populace. They have to explain the threats so that they understand why it's important to spend this money. And that's a part of leadership, and that's what's got to happen.
I would like to ask you about the European Deterrence Initiative. As I can see, maybe you can correct me, I mean, mostly this project is to answer the challenges that we are facing from the increasement of Russia's military forces and so on. And response was somehow even increasing the budget of this project this year. I mean, for the 2019. I mean, and this is kind of increasing the U.S. presence in Europe, increasing the military capabilities of U.S. In Europe, and so on. Can we speak about and can we recognize that we are facing somehow the new arms race?
So first I want to tackle the European Deterrence Initiative.
Yes.
You know, that's U.S.'s investment in deterrence activities in Europe, and it's substantial. It's billions of dollars a year, $5 billion this last budget in a year.
6.5 is a new. Yeah.
6.5 potentially coming up. That's a lot of money. That's the U.S. investment, but it's not specifically an investment for the U.S. and Europe. I mean, it's an investment in our European allies. A good deal of that funding goes into countries in Europe to support infrastructure, aerial ports, seaports, locks, lines of communication, things that serve as a deterrent and assist to military mobility, for instance. But actually in between, they served mobility of commerce, transportation of goods. They serve many other things. So you know, the deterrence piece has a broad perspective to it. Its focus is in fact military, but in many ways it helps the economy, the countries you're in, and it's an investment that we make. And what we expect is that those countries would invest in their own nation as well, right alongside of us.
What about the arms race? Is that somehow,
well,
do you have some kind of feeling?
I don't know that I would call it, you know, necessarily an arms race. It's actually what we need to do to ensure our security, all of the nations. Russia's modernizing today, so is China. Russia's modernizing at a very fast pace. They are modernizing across all their domains, and they're using that aggressively. We have to remain dominant in each of those areas. If not, then we're subject to their coercion, and that's true for all the nations in Europe. So it's not necessarily an arms race, it's a responsibility to ensure that we as the military can protect our countries. That, you know, the capability we're building here, that your military can ensure the territorial integrity of Georgia.
That's what I would like to ask you. Is there any kind of effect from the EDI for Georgia? how the Georgia is in touch with the EDI?
Well, actually, I can't tell you specifically out of EDI what comes into here, but the United States invests heavily. If you look at foreign military financing, you look at the funds that we're putting into GDRP, the funding that we've put into the Combat Training Center that we're working together with you on, those are billions of dollars as well over time. Money well spent with a very strong ally. We've served together in combat, side by side. We've shed blood together. We're going to be here with you, and it's an investment we're willing to make with Georgia.
One more issue I would like to ask you, which is also very concerning inside Europe right now. This is President Trump's decision about withdrawal from Iran's nuclear deal, which somehow increased the tensions in the region. I mean, the Middle East and so on. It increased also the possibility of Iran to restart its nuclear program. And it is somehow the high risk that China and Russia would not join the new sanctions, for instance, and even European countries refuse to join the sanctions against Iran, and they are going to stay inside the deal. Don't you think that the JCPOA was not actually the perfect but not bad instrument to control Iran's nuclear aspirations?
Well, listen, that's a political decision made by each country. The United States made theirs, didn't see it as a good deal, and obviously believed that it was better to leave the deal. Each one of the nations, again, has a sovereign decision to make, and the allies, for instance, in NATO, we have differences of opinion, but NATO is strong, and I think you'll see it continue to be strong here in the future, despite some of these differences like JCPOA.
But again, the issue of controlling Iran's nuclear aspirations are rising up right now, as I can see. What could be the means to press Iran to come to a new deal, or how can we control Iran's nuclear aspirations since the United States left the deal?
That's for the United States to deal with. I'm sure that I don't deal with that, but I'm sure that we've got a plan as we've left this one in order to bring them to bay. Keep in mind that this isn't just about their nuclear capability and where that's ended. One of our key problems is their malign influence around the world. It's very active, it's very dangerous, and those are the things that they have not stopped doing. And so that's part of our objective here, is to deal with all of the problems with Iran, not just one. And
actually, this issue also rising up the issue of security for the U.S., the biggest, the biggest strategic partner in the Middle East, Israel. And their security is threatened by this kind of actions. Do you already have, the U.S., does the U.S. has already any kind of plan how to support Israel right now in this, to solve this first phase of the increased threats to its security?
And are you talking broadly within Europe?
Yeah.
Well, yes. We have at the highest level, we have a plan it's a strategic plan for Europe, for instance. And then we work together within NATO. NATO's plan for the defense of Europe, that's part of what I do as a military person. And then we work together within NATO to enact that plan. So the things that you see here in Georgia, for instance, our bilateral relationship, the funds that we're investing here, the things that we're doing to train together, that's part of that plan. And out of that comes not only the protection of your own country by your own forces, but a very capable force, Georgian force that's served in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Iraq and Kosovo, serves today in Afghanistan with us. And as I said, I've served alongside your forces. That's part of that defense. I'll finish this by saying, look, of all the challenges that we've talked about in Europe, the best way to deal with those challenges is among alliances and with partners. If we're strong as democracies and we stick together, we can deal with any of these challenges much better than we can do it singly.
General, finally, I would like to ask a specific issue. Recently, we bought the Javelins, the anti-tank missiles. So few people in Georgia, not a few actually, some experts of defense system, they're talking about that, that Georgia would not have any kind of tank attack from some countries or some tank invasion because the Georgian landscape and so on and so on. What kind of tasks do we have having the javelins? I mean, what kind of tasks do we face to have the javelin, and what should we solve with this?
Well, I'll tell you, the Russians certainly have mechanized and armored forces. There's no doubt about that, and they occupy a part of your country and 2 of the territories. Javelins is valuable in other ways as well. It's a great defensive system, and that's why your country wanted it, why we supported providing it, because it is an excellent defensive system and it will reinforce your ability to protect the integrity of your country.
General Scaparottis, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's good to see you today.